pays for. Medicare tends to pay for whatever the FDA approves. We'll just pass the cost along to you in the form of higher premiums. And that's why since 1998-99, premiums have just skyrocketed.
In fact, the average total premium for a family of 4 last year topped 10 grand.
Doctors here in Boston say they're seeing an increasing number of patients who cannot afford the most basic preventative health measures, like a blood test.
72 million Americans had trouble paying for medical care last year.
Hospital bills are now a leading cause of personal bankruptcy.
General Motors says retiree health care coverage is a key reason the company is in trouble.
I think it's interesting that a country that has a $12 trillion budget spends a sixth of it on health care. And our work would suggest that we're not spending it wisely. The Dartmouth slogan is Vox Clemente in Deserta, which is that voice crying out in the wilderness. And I thought it was a good analogy for me, because I came here because I heard another voice, Jack Winberg, talking about the disparities in the delivery of our healthcare system and the irrationality of its utilization. And now, having been here for 12 or so years, I realize it's an uphill battle. You can't fight City Hall, but we're going to try.
In the early 1990s, Dr. Jim Weinstein made a courageous decision. He decided to walk away from tenure in an endowed chair at the University of Iowa to go to Dartmouth, where he would participate in devising ways to help patients become involved in making decisions about their own care. As a surgeon, Weinstein had long felt that patients just weren't getting a fair shake, as he put it. They weren't getting the information they needed about the risks of treatments. Too often, informed consent was informed persuasion. Ultimately, illness in his own family would drive that lesson home.
My daughter's name's Brianna. She had beautiful blue eyes, curly brown hair. Your first child, the light of your life. 13 months later, I get a call from our pediatrician saying, could you come over to the hospital? I said, why? Well, we need to talk to you and your wife. I said, is everything okay? And I said, I think it's better you just come over here. And of course, I don't like that. And my heart has now left my chest and is in my stomach. Can't imagine what's wrong. I actually have to drive from the laboratory to the hospital. My heart rate's probably 120 and my breathing's very rapid. And I walk into the pediatrics hospital. I asked my wife what's wrong, and she said, they won't tell me, they won't tell me. The doctor walks in with about, seems like 10 other people. Very intrusive. And said, I think your daughter has leukemia, and we need to treat her immediately. The protocol for treatment was a very intense chemotherapy. She would lose her hair quickly, she would be sick, she would develop sores in her mouth, she wouldn't be able to eat because of sores from the chemotherapy in her esophagus. She would have all kinds of rashes. Her blood counts would be almost zero, so her risk of infection would be very high. We couldn't take her anyplace. She had to be protected. And it sounds, well, that's not so bad. We can do that for a week. But the protocol was for 3 years. She did pretty well for about, I think, 2 years. And then the leukemia came back. And they said we need to reinduce her with the bad medicines again, and we have to consider brain and spinal radiation. So spinal taps every day for 3 weeks. I said, I don't get it. I mean, you just told us if we follow this protocol, these are the results. we did everything you said, and it's still not working. And now you want us to do something worse. Well, you have no choice, and if you don't do that, we'll sue you. I said, what? If you don't do what we tell you, we'll sue you. I said, excuse me, I'm an intelligent person. This is my daughter. My wife and I will make the decisions about her care. And I don't appreciate being threatened.
Why would doctors threaten to sue a parent whose child is dying? In all probability, the physicians were concerned that if they didn't follow the protocol and go on with the further treatment that they planned to give her, they might be sued for malpractice, even though the doctors couldn't explain the protocol or give them any assurance that they knew that the next treatments would do Brianna any good. In a way, I think it's a response to the uncertainty that they say, we are the doctors, we know what we are doing, and this is the way we do it, and this is what we do next. And if anyone, whether it's a resident, a patient, or a relative says, well, why? They say, because it's the way we do it, period.
You know, doctors are trained, I hope, in every case, to think about what's best for the person that they're taking care of. They're trained to give medications, to do operations, to measure different tests with blood sugars or blood pressures. They're not really trained well in this decision process of giving information to patients to empower them to make decisions. That is a big shortfall in the American healthcare system, and maybe in healthcare internationally. As I travel around the world and talk about shared decision making, what we like to call informed patient choice. I was recently in China, and the Chinese doctors were very excited about this new idea of actually sharing with the patient in the decision process. Why is that a new idea?
We have really good data that show when you take patients and you really inform them about their choices, patients make more frugal choices. They make more efficient choices than the healthcare system does. Wonderful work of a researcher named Annette O'Connor studied patient shared decision-making with respect to surgery. What she found across a range of studies was when patients actually got to participate in the decision, surgery rates fell by almost 25%, and satisfaction and outcomes improved. So an activated patient, really engaged, I'm not talking about payment here, I'm not talking about shifting burden of cost, just engaged with knowledge and shared decision-making, better outcomes, lower cost, higher satisfaction. You know, what more could you want?
It's 1971, and girls had to choose between Donnie, David, and Bobby. Boys had banana seeds and a baseball card in their bike spoke, and a new hospital opened, East Jefferson General Hospital. Since then,
intensive care requires a finely orchestrated team, led by physicians and nurses passionate about patient care.
And turning discoveries into new ways to prevent and treat disease. Some of the world's
It's interesting how hospitals advertise. Who would make a decision about where to have their baby or where to be treated for cancer based on an ad they saw on TV?
#1 for heart surgery in New York State.
A magnet hospital for nursing excellence.
Hospitals are not advertising to the patient. Hospitals are advertising to doctors. Hospitals don't have patients, doctors have patients. And hospitals want doctors to bring their well-heeled, well-insured patients to that hospital.
Our award-winning full-service cardiology department has been nationally recognized as the best in the region.
Hospitals have engaged in what many call a medical arms race.
Using advanced microtechnology, physicians...
Typically 4 or 5 hospitals within a 5-mile, 10-mile, 15-mile radius will all buy the same technology because they're competing with each other.
When you need us, rest assured, we will deliver an exceptional performance. Mercy Regional Health Center. Experience the artistry of critical care.
One time, Dr. Don Berwick called a hospital in Texas and said, we've heard you have a very good procedure for treating a particular disease. We'd like to learn more about your protocol so other hospitals can use it. And the hospital said, we can't tell you that. It's a competitive advantage in our market that we're better at treating this disease, and it's very lucrative. So this is proprietary information.
We believe in markets, right? Isn't that the American way? Well, markets mean competition. Isn't that the American way? Competition makes things come out right. Well, what does that mean in healthcare? More hospitals, so they compete with each other. More doctors compete with each other. More pharmaceutical companies. We set up war. Wait a minute. Let's talk about the patient. Patient doesn't need a war.
The patient isn't the center of a collaboration. The patient is the victim of a competition. There's a saying in Swahili when, I can't remember this, when the elephants fight, the grass is trampled. The patient is essentially the grass.
Most people in healthcare, either delivering the care or getting the care, actually don't seem to realize quite how hazardous and risky healthcare is. Every time you have a test, every time you have a procedure or a piece of surgery, it can hurt you. It can make you worse, not better. It's a risk-benefit trade-off, and the risks are a lot higher than people may understand.
My husband and I met in the summer of '99 when we were both the tour bus drivers for a Tommy Hilfiger Cosmetics tour. We fell in love during this bus tour and wound up settling in Houston, getting married. I worked at a roofing company. He was a maintenance mechanic for a valve manufacturer. We lived very quiet, boring, normal life. Come home after work to my family, get up, go to work the next day. We were very content. We were living the American dream, and life was quiet and peaceful. On March 5th, 2003, I returned from my lunch break from work and got a call from a woman saying that Curtis was burned and he's at the hospital. I let my employer know that I had to run to the hospital and pick up my husband. Finally, some doctors came out and said, your husband has a serious burn injury. 35% of his body has suffered from second and third degree burns. He's going to be in the hospital for about 35 days. And they escorted me into a room, and there was what looked like burned paper all over the floor. It was his skin, charred skin all over the floor. And all I could see was a pile of blankets trembling on a gurney. And I was following this pile. It was an enormous pile of blankets. And I finally found his head. And my heart just broke. I said, I'm so sorry. And he said, no, I'm sorry. He had skin graft surgery the following week. So he was still just mainly immobile, but he made attempts over the next week to get up out of bed and walk by himself, still having a lot of challenges and a lot of pain. I didn't know what to expect, but if you can expect a sick person getting better, he gets a little better every day. After the second skin graft surgery, that was on a Wednesday, I didn't see him again until Friday afternoon. And as soon as I walked in the room, I could tell immediately that he was very sick. He's just laying there, just screaming and moaning, constant. He was in constant acute pain. And I asked the resident to call me at home when they found out what was going on. And she said, oh, he has gallstones. And she said, they're going to make, the gallstones have blocked his bile duct, and they're going to make an incision to release these stones. And that'll give him some relief. And I'm like, thank goodness. I said, could you call me when it's done? Because I thought they were preparing to do this right then and there. It was 10 o'clock at night on a Friday. I went back Saturday, the next day, to the burn unit to see how much better he was doing, and he wasn't there. He was down in the GI ward having this procedure. This is 11 o'clock the next morning. That means from 10 o'clock the night that I left him, they left him like that for 12, 13 hours. How could you do that to somebody? And this was a man screaming in pain, obviously in acute pain, having problems breathing. I mean, this was a emergency. It was obvious. I'm not just being hysterical because I was his wife and he had a sore finger. He was critical. And I was shocked that he spent the whole night in agony, and I just felt terrible. I thought, how could I have left him? I thought they were going to do this right then and there. You know, this was, darn it.
As I was doing research for the book, one of the things I found out is that Our hospitals have become chaotic and uncaring places. The emphasis in our high-tech system has shifted from care to cure. There was a time when doctors couldn't do much to cure you, so all they could do was comfort you, care for you, try to make you comfortable. Now, in that high-tech business we call a healthcare system, nurses are too busy to make sure there's a pillow under your head. Literally, they're filling out charts, they're doing paperwork, they're tending to the technology of the business of medicine.
If you've got the money, honey, I've got the time. We'll go honky-tonkin', we're gonna have a time. We'll hit all the night spots, dance, drink beer and wine. If you've got the money, honey, I've got the time.
Somebody says nobody in Nashville makes anything. We just do stuff and people send us money. I've been told they never had a recession in the history of the place. This is a music row. Every one of these houses is now a recording studio. There's Love Monkey Music, Flashville, Sharp Objects Music, CSAC, whatever that is. This is the heart of Music City, USA. Here's what a nurse told me. Tell patients to remove the foil from a suppository before insertion.
Clifton Metters had many careers. He's been an author, a family doctor, an epidemiologist, a healthcare administrator, and the youngest ever dean of the University of Alabama Medical School. Over the years, he's watched the business of healthcare turn into a driving force in the U.S. economy, much of it headquartered in Nashville.
This is Maryland Way. Maryland Way is the center road of Maryland Farms. And Maryland Farms is a huge complex. The predominant business in here is healthcare corporations of one sort or another. This goes on and on for over a mile here. And this is not called for-profit hospital row or anything like that, but this is the equivalent of the music row that we went down for the recording industry.
If you've got the money, honey, I've got the time. We'll go honky-tonkin', we're gonna have a time. But if you run short of money, I'll run short of time. 'Cause you with no more money, honey, I've no more time.
This is titled The Nashville Healthcare Industry, the Family Tree 2006. Every little square here is a healthcare business, industry, or spinoff. We have 3 mother corporations here. HCA, which is Hospital Corporation of America, spun off all of these. Hospital Affiliates, which is a spinoff of HCA, spun off all of these. And Health Trust, which was a spinoff of Hospital Affiliates and HCA, spun off all of these. So this is a massive industrial health complex that's headquartered here in Nashville.
After World War II, while other countries let the government begin to intervene in healthcare to make sure everyone got care, to regulate it to make sure it was good care, in this country, doctors very, very strongly opposed any government involvement or anyone being involved in telling a doctor what to do. After Medicare was passed in 1965, elderly patients were getting far more care than they had been before then. And that's when our industrial medical complex, I would say, took off. By the early 70s, there was so much money involved that suddenly people began to say, you know what, medicine is too important to be managed by doctors. We all know doctors are bad managers. What we need are businessmen managing healthcare. And that's when healthcare went from being physician-centered and controlled to a large degree by doctors, to being controlled by the corporation and the CEOs of those corporations. And over time, more and more, the CEO of a hospital would not even be somebody with an MD. He would be somebody with an MBA. And CEOs bent on growth, bent on higher quarterly earnings, quarter after quarter and year after year, are always pushing for more sales, more revenues, more and more and more. It produces more, but more may not be better for our health.
I've heard it said that the official bird of healthcare is a crane. Look around at any hospital in your community, there's a crane on top adding rooms. You know, we overbuilt it. And then having overbuilt it, we use it, and then we think using it is necessary. And it's a spiral.
The worst thing that could happen to a director of a hospital is that everybody, all of a sudden, would be healthy. You know, I'm not saying that he's overjoyed when there's an epidemic. Clearly he isn't. I'm not saying that he's overjoyed when people are sick. Clearly they're decent folks. But they're running something where what they're selling is hospital beds.
If you can believe it, Rashi Fine has survived 5 decades of the battle for health care reform. In 1953, he served on President Truman's commission on the health needs of America, at a time when Truman was pushing for universal coverage. Then he worked with JFK when he fought unsuccessfully for Medicare, a battle that LBJ would later win. As a professor of medical economics at Harvard, Fine has never given up. He firmly believes that medicine should not be all about money. As he puts it, we live in a society, not just in an economy.
Well, we spend more than any other country, and we spend a higher percentage of our gross domestic product, and our gross domestic product is larger than most other countries. So we are spending per capita one heck of a lot more than anybody else, which ought to be disturbing, if only because there are lots of other things that we could be doing with money. We could have more money for education, or more money for infrastructure, or more money for bridges and transportation, or we could put money into high-speed trains, or we could have tax cuts. On the other hand, somebody could say, well, we have chosen to spend money on health care, and that's also a good thing. True. But interestingly, disturbingly, frighteningly, pick your own word, we spend more money and we are not healthier. We don't live longer. We don't seem to be getting as much value for money.
It shouldn't be any surprise that there is a huge disconnect between the amount of dollars that actually poured into health care and the health indicators of a population, because this system was not designed to serve this end. That's a fundamental realization that we need to come to. And until we do, I think, we'll still be trying to tinker with the market in some kind of funny way, just a little tweak or adjustment to make it work better. But it was never designed, actually, to meet healthcare needs.
The next day they told us that his lung had collapsed. That gallstone had blocked his bile duct, and the blocked bile duct had put stress on his pancreas, and his pancreas sprung a leak, and that this sent some fluid to his lungs. And that because he had this fluid in his lungs, he needed a little help breathing, and that's why he's on a ventilator. They also said that people who are on ventilators usually try to fight it, and that for that reason that they had him in a coma. I called the case manager for the insurance company and said, he needs some specialists. I want a lung specialist and a gut specialist to see him immediately, and if they've already done so, I want to talk to him right now. The lung doctor never called me. The gut doctor called me right away, and he said that the pancreas sprung a leak. He said everything we already heard at the meeting. He said, but all the plumbing's working and I'm watching him, and he's fine, don't worry about it. I said, okay, I just want you to know that he's dying, and whatever extreme measures you have available to take, now's the time to take them. Right now, tonight, because he's dying. There's something going on that somebody's missed, and if it's not in his gut, then it must be those lungs, but thank you for calling. I just felt like I had to get that off my chest. The following morning, I called the hospital, and I asked his day shift nurse, has the lung doctor been here? And he said, yeah, but he already came and went. He said he doesn't have anything to say to you. But the gut doctor's here, and he's rushing your husband to surgery. And I said, what for? And he said, gallbladder. And I said, why didn't you call me? And I slammed down the phone and went racing up to the hospital, and there's the same doctor that just told me last night that my husband is just fine. And he said, I took a look at the week-old ultrasound with my own eyes. There's no need to do another ultrasound. The gallbladder is dead, and it needs to come out. And he was clearing out an OR stat. And I tugged his lapel, and I said, thank you, because I knew something was wrong.
A lot of people are hurt by healthcare. It's a double-edged industry. We have miracles. You know, we can do things for people today that we couldn't have dreamt of being able to do 15 or 20 years ago. Heart surgery, cancer care, organ transplants, really audacious and wonderful stuff that we can help people with. But every time you do it, you add hazards. There are side effects. There are risks. We estimate that there are at least 15 million injuries a year to patients in American hospitals. 15 million.
Now where we're at is my husband's on a ventilator. He's septic. He's just had major surgery. He's got a leaking pancreas. We were told that he had acquired bacteria now in his lungs. He's not a burn patient anymore, because remember the burns were supposed to heal in about a month? We're 3 months now, okay? Every organ and system that operates the human body was under attack at some point with my husband, some of them all at the same time. And it was the result of, I believe, this revolving door of the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. They sure as heck weren't communicating with me. The patient's in a coma. There's never the same person at the bedside from one day to the next, except me. And nobody wants to hear from me. Because he was in a coma, he could never close his eyes. And his eyeballs dried out. I mean, I don't mean to be gross, but they were literally oozing out of his skull. And me and my sister, it was another thing that repeatedly, every time we were there, we needed an ophthalmologist. We needed to do something about his eyes. We were putting eye drops in his eyes. We were massaging his eyelids, asking and asking and asking for an ophthalmologist. And it took 2 weeks for an ophthalmologist before they finally came. And it took 2 weeks because, again, we finally had to get ugly about it and stomp our feet and yell and scream, we demand an ophthalmologist. This was a patient who was in the finest hospital in America, one of the best, carte blanche. Money was not an object. They could do whatever they wanted to him to get him well. And I don't know about all the high-tech, sophisticated medical care that he got, but I was not impressed with what I could see in my layman's world, that the simplest things they could not seem to accomplish, and that they were resulting in complications that cost more money to treat, take longer to cure, and might cause other complications in and of themselves. And it starts back, you know, with the gallbladder. Gallbladder, that whole nightmare, I mean, it caused kidney failure, heart trouble, you know, pneumonia, and the longer you're on a ventilator, you're likely to get a bacterial infection, and one thing cascades into another, and it was a lack of prompt patient care that resulted in these additional complications. And it affects the cost of health care, it affects the length of hospitalization, and it affects everything and everybody. The longer he's in the hospital, the more I'm missing work. It's affecting my employer. There's financial consequences to everybody, yet the hospital is generating more revenue, because the longer he's there, the more money they're making. The more complicated procedure they have to do, the more money they're going to make. And you can't help but eventually reach a conclusion when this happens day after day after day for months on end, that they're generating revenue, that they really don't care about this carcass in a bed. They don't care if this man can ever see again. You know what the ophthalmologist said when he finally showed up? It's a good thing you called me when you did. This man's lucky to have people who care about him. I almost broke down in tears. I mean, I wanted to take him and shake him and say, we've been asking for you for 2 weeks, you know, but I didn't, of course. It's enough to drive you insane. and he determined that his eyeballs were permanently scarred due to exposure. That doesn't happen overnight. You know, that's prolonged neglect, and that's just one example.
We got through and had a few weeks over the years of no treatment. Never a day without a smile. Ever. She was a great big sister. They had a lot of fun together as sisters. I was in Germany giving a lecture, and I could tell in my wife's voice something was wrong when I called home. Gone one day. And she wouldn't tell me that she had another relapse. And I got home from Germany, and she said, you know, Brianna relapsed again. So I picked my daughter up and I hugged her. And said, this isn't possible. We've done everything. So. Back to the doctor. Another protocol. Radiation she has to be put to sleep for. She has to be taped down onto a table. Imagine the effects of radiation on your child's brain and spinal cord when it's developing. Will there be brain damage, doctor? Oh, your daughter's so smart, there'll be no problem. Will she get a secondary tumor from the radiation? Oh, it's possible, but it's 20 years away. Oh, okay, I guess I'm supposed to just accept that. We take her for radiation. She'd have to go for 5 days in a row. They put her to sleep. She'd come home and we couldn't comfort her. We had to put padding all around the room so she wouldn't hurt herself. It upset her so much and bothered her brain so much. Am I helping her? Am I hurting her? Is this barbaric? Is this treatment? We started investigating other opportunities. There's got to be something different. We were told about somebody at the University of Minnesota who was doing gene therapy. We called him. I said, so what is this treatment? Can you tell me about it? Does she also have to take chemotherapy and radiation? No, it's just this new drug. We're having a lot of success with it. You have to come here to Minnesota. Really no side effects. Seemed too good to be true, of course. So I thought I would call his nurse and ask her, unbeknownst to him, how the patients do and what treatments they get. She said, no, they all take chemotherapy. I said, oh, thank you very much. They weren't honest with me. So I called him back, this rather arrogant person, and I said, you know, I spoke to your nurse, and she told me that a lot of your patients are on other treatments. Oh, some are. So I'm going to bring my daughter to an experimental treatment in a place with a person who doesn't even tell the truth, to another physician who understands. I said, I can't do it. I can't put her through something with somebody I don't even trust or know.